Actually, trekking in the Himalayas, there are main trails, and there are villages up there. You can go off to the side, and there are remote areas, but it's the rural life there. So on the way, there are these main thoroughfares that yaks and people walk. There's no mechanized travel there. So if something happens to you and you're at 17,000 feet, occasionally at that point they could get helicopters in, but not often because of the weather, and the cost is totally prohibitive for most mortals, unless you're on a big expedition and funded that way. But you either walk out or you ride out on a yak or a knack, which is a female yak, and you're beholden to the conditions there. So you're on your own steam. So I would stop at it's recommended that you go numerous thousands of feet and then you spend a day and acclimatize, because the air does get very thin up there. And so I stopped at Namche Pazar. There are these different villages along the way, and you get into these villages and there are tea houses. And when I was there, I could get a bed for 25 cents a night, American, and get a meal. And I made the choice to eat what the locals ate. And I basically stayed healthy my whole time there. I got skinny as a rail. I lived primarily on boiled potatoes. Because after Sir Edmund Hillary started doing expeditions, what began happening is, as these expeditions came out, they didn't want to pack out all their canned goods. So they would gift the Tibetan refugee communities all along up here in the Khumbu or the Mount Everest region their supplies. So Westerners, as we were beginning to travel there more and more, even in the early 80s, 70s and 80s, you could go into these little side business, little stores, and you could buy canned sardines or jars of peanut butter or whatever. And some of the Westerners that were traveling then did that. But a lot of them got sick. You're at high altitude, you're drinking funny water. So I was able to hook up with my friends. We had money, Rimdu. We ended up going up as far as you can go in the Mount Everest region without having a whole expedition. There's a little village which is really only one building called Lobuche. It's a little over 17,000 feet. We were there in November. It was starting to get really cold. Well, I had down clothes, I had a down bag, I had a down parka, I had wool clothes, and I had everything on, and I was freezing my fanny off. And from there you can go up. I think Everest, the first Everest base camp is around 20,000, and we could do day trips up, get to a place called Kalapatar, which is around 18,000. So, I was, 3,000 feet is actually a good distance, but we got as close to Everest base camp as anyone could get without full, expedition, sirdars and portars, and you have to be self-contained. So I thought it was pretty fantastic as a single woman going solo. And from the monastery at Tangboche, which is at 12,500 to 17,000, I then carried my own pack. There are, of course, endless stories up in the Himalayas.
What was the sky like at night?
Unbelievable. The stars. I mean, I could jokingly say on a clear night, you're looking for night sky in between all the stars. There are more stars than there are night sky. It's unimaginable. The air is thin, the air is clear. When we were at Dangboche, out behind, they actually at that point had a little guest house because of the expeditions. And you could go out on a knoll and you could stand and turn 365 degrees, and you just had Himalayan mountains all around you. So on the full moon at night, you know, you would have some stars, but here you had the Himalayan mountains covered with snow, moonlight, Tibetan Buddhist prayer flags flapping, or, I mean, it was otherworldly. And you're at thin air and altitude, so, you know, you're naturally high, just on thin air. You're at elevated states.
What'd you think about when you were up there? Away from everyone that you knew. All by yourself.
I was the most blessed woman on the face of the earth. You know, to have, to be gifted these experiences, to be gifted with a family who, however different, strange I was, however I stretched everyone around me, that people just said, go for it, even if they didn't want me to go for it, that these doors kept opening, that I was divinely guided, that I was an awake human being. I was gifted awakeness in this life. It's a hard one.
No 9 to 5 for you, huh?
I've done 9 to 5 about I don't wear what's true and correct, what's honorable, what has integrity, and of course I got it from my mom and my dad.
Thank you.
Well, that's how they've lived their life. I mean, they were my model growing up. Living our lives with as much honesty, integrity, and impeccability as we can. Of course, none of us are perfect. And then we own our mistakes and we keep going forward and we say yes and have courage. So.